our lips, the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength, our rock, and our Redeemer. Amen. So today's readings include two different call stories. First, we have the call story of Samuel, where Samuel hears an audible call from God. God says, "Hey!" And Samuel, in disbelief, thinks that Eli is calling him. Again, he goes to sleep, and this happens multiple times until he realizes that God is using God's own voice to call him. And then in the gospel for this morning, we hear the call story of some of the disciples. Jesus comes right up to them and calls them to be disciples, a very personal calling. It's extraordinary, incredible, and truly unbelievable, especially to us who I'm sure most of our call stories don't turn out like that. Most of the time we don't hear, some people do, but most of us don't hear an audible voice from God say, "Hey, follow me. Hey, you should do X, Y, or Z with your life. You should be a volunteer on the ambulance," right? God doesn't say, "Hey." Even though we wish God would, it would be a little bit easier for us to discern our calls in life if God came to us personally and gave us that type of call. But that doesn't happen most of the time. And that didn't happen for me. I thought that since we have two call stories this morning that I'm a little bit jealous of because they are very personal and intimate and straightforward. Mine is not quite like that. And since we're all still getting to know each other, I thought I'd share mine. When I was 15, I went to the youth gathering in San Antonio, Texas. I traveled with a bunch of youth, one only from my church, but multiple youth from the area where I grew up who had larger youth groups. And we took a plane, which was very fun. I had flown before, but flying with your friends, that makes it even better. So I flew with a bunch of youth to San Antonio, Texas. During the time that we were there, they had very different paths that you could take. You could go and do servant leadership, where you would go and clean things or help build houses, things like that, manual labor. And our group didn't sign up early enough for that, so that was out of the question. But a lot of groups did that. And there were other different events throughout each day where you could go and experience different things, where you could, be filled up and excited about the gospel and ministry and God. And so here I was, 15 years old. Our chaperone said, "Well, you all, as long as you stay in this block radius, you can go out and go to the different," we were calling them treks, "that you want, and experience San Antonio and what it has to offer with the youth gathering." So there I was, and me and my good friend, we went to the mall because the mall wasn't far away. So we thought, well, nobody will know, we'll just go to the mall and hang out there, and then we won't have to go to these other things that they were offering. That was against the rules, but we did it anyway. So we went to the mall, and I bought some sneakers and some other random stuff that I didn't need, because my parents gave me money to go to the youth gathering and eat, and so I bought shoes. And during that time, there were several days of this opportunity to go out and do different things, and each time I did things I wasn't supposed to do. I didn't go to the treks that I could have been filled in. I went to, mostly shopping, but other stuff. And that's how I spent my time. But at night, there were these crazy events, right? It was worship, and they had speakers and preachers, and the music was live. They had bands, and then after the worship service time, there were live bands at night, like famous Christian bands that you could stay and watch, and then afterwards you could go back and you would have devotion time with your group, And so I really felt filled by these things. Now, why that didn't lead me to go to the treks, you can ask the Holy Spirit about that, but at night I felt very filled. And on the last night, or afternoon that I was there, I went and I started to have this feeling about being called to ministry. I thought, I could be a pastor, right? When I told other people, they were like, you? They knew I didn't go to the treks, like my friends and things like that. They knew what kind of person I was. I like to joke around. In my teenage years, and probably still, I'm a little vulgar. I have a very dry sense of humor. And so people often would be very surprised, especially my friends at school, when I would say, I think when I grow up, I'm going to be a pastor. So I went through the rest of high school thinking that. My first year of college, I went to Muhlenberg College. I joined some of the Lutheran groups there. As you might know, it's a Lutheran-affiliated school. So I went, and they had a pre-ministry type of group. I didn't attend that so much because, excuse me, it was very cliquey. And Lutheran student movement and things like this. So I got a little bit more involved in what was going on in the Lutheran world beyond just my church and beyond the youth gathering and smaller gatherings and things like that. So I had a very bad experience at Muhlenberg. The chaplain at the time actually told me that I didn't have the gifts for ministry and that I wouldn't be a pastor. So that was heartbreaking, but also very confusing for me. When I was at Muhlenberg, I was 18, turning 19, so, still vulnerable in my youth. And I left Muhlenberg, but before I had left, I had said to the synod, I said, I think I'd like to be a pastor. I want to start to explore that a little bit. And so they gave me the paperwork that I needed to fill out to entrance candidacy, and I met with Mary Gade, who still works at the synod, and she gave me all the paperwork, and she gave me this book called What Shall I Say? And it's all about if you feel like you're called to ministry, how you can start to test that out and see if your call is actually to ordained ministry. So I got all this stuff, I filled everything out, I put it in an envelope, I was going to send it, and I threw it away. And I thought, it's not right. I don't want to be a pastor. I'm a smart person. That's sort of a dumb career path for a smart person who could make money. Forget it. So there I was. I left Muhlenberg and I went to Alvernia. Alvernia is a Franciscan school, so it's associated with the Catholic Church. And there I felt a real sense of spirituality. And they really fostered that in people, and I really enjoyed that. So I liked being there. And again, I started to think, I think I'll get the paperwork and I'll fill it out. And so I called Synod, and they gave me the information so I could download the forms online, which gives you an unlimited supply of forms. And I filled it all out, and I was going to send it, and then I thought, I should go to school for psychology and be a therapist and make more money. It's similar to ministry. You talk to a lot of people, you make more money. So I threw everything away. I applied to grad schools that were not seminaries. I got in, I was going to go there. I graduated in December. In November, 1 month before I graduated, I thought, I have to go to seminary. Kind of late in the game. I called the seminary and said, hey, can I come in a month? Because it started in January, and they said, who are you, first of all? And I told them, and I gave them all my information, and they said, well, if you come for an interview, we have to get to know you, see you, because I wasn't yet in the candidacy process, which is alongside but separate from the seminary process. And they said, okay, you can come after my interview. And so a month later, I wound up there. And I thought, all right, things are going well. I got in quickly, and it seems like this is going to be okay. And I started in the middle of the year, so that made things a little bit difficult because it's really designed for you to start at the right time, and that's how your classes will progress. So I had to call a few professors because I didn't have the prerequisites and ask if I could take their classes, and they said yes. So I said to myself, well, this is going really well. So I moved to Philadelphia. from Reading, and unfortunately, the first day I was there, I lit my apartment on fire. And so I had bought extra stuff because I was moving from my parents' house, and what wasn't destroyed in the fire was destroyed in the flood that ensued from the sprinkler system. And it really happened because I didn't have any counter space. I had a box on the stove. I was putting stuff above the stove in a cabinet. My hip must have turned the stove on, and at the right time, my stepdad said, "Let's go to lunch." And I said, "Okay." So there we went across the street to Wawa, and I came back, and there's this massive exodus. And I thought, I guess it's lunchtime. Maybe everybody's going to lunch, right? No, they were leaving because there was a fire, and it was my apartment. So I lost a lot of my personal belongings, and I thought, now I'm going home. This is it. That takes the cake, really. And my admissions counselor said, you don't have to go home. God didn't light the fire, you did. So it's gonna be okay. We still believe you're called to ministry, just random stuff happens. So I did go home for about a week, and then I came back. And I moved into a studio while they fixed my apartment on the other side of the building. And while I was in the studio, my friend next door, Angel, his sprinkler system exploded. And so everything flooded, which was really fun. And the bishop's office got flooded again, which made them really happy. And so the bishop of Southeast Penn, luckily not our bishop, so yeah. And, okay, so that happened. And then they thought, well, my friend had all these welts I over her chest and stomach and arms. And then all of us started to have this plague. And I thought to myself, these are definitely plagues, right? First we have fire and water, and then more water, and now we have bugs, right? So we had bed bugs, and we had bed bugs for a while until they finally exterminated them, and that was really awful. And all this time I'm thinking, I have to go away. This is not good. And so, there's that. And then I got food poisoning really bad. That was really the icing on the cake, was when the refectory, the food establishment at the seminary got me sick, and me and 10 other people, including a visiting professor. And at that point, as I was laying in my bed, I thought, if I don't go home after this, nothing's going to chase me away. And so I did go home because my mom was at home, and I wanted my mom to take care of me while I was sick, even though I was 22 at the time. And there it was, one semester of seminary in the books. And as time progressed, things got a little easier. The plagues weren't hitting me anymore. I was, thriving in the seminary environment. I had the opportunity to have formation, which a lot of people don't really get that opportunity, especially within a 4-year block of time, to have time to work on myself, how I would be a leader, how I would associate with other people. So it was, after all, a good, though trying experience. Then, after I graduated from seminary, I spent a year looking for a call. And I guess you guys could thank St. Paul's for being extremely persistent, as I was called to supply there over and over again, and they kept begging me. They said, "Please be our pastor." And the first time they said, "Please be our pastor," I said, "No, I am not moving to Tower City. No one's heard of it. I don't even know where it is. Every time I come here, I have to use a GPS. No." I had in my mind that I would do urban ministry. Well, God had other plans, as God does. So then I, went a few months, and then I started to think, and the Synod said to me, "Why are you fighting going to Tower City? That would be a good place for you." And I said, "Do you know how many people are in the whole township?" There were 5,000 people in my high school, so I wasn't used to that. But as I prayed about it and thought about it, I thought, I really feel called here, even though I'm trying to fight it. So there I went. And this all worked out. And then On May 27th of this past year, I was ordained as a minister of Word and Sacrament. And it is such a blessing and truly humbling and incredible. And as I think about it, I'm still a little jealous of different call stories. You know, like God never really came to me. I can't even credit God with the fires and the floods and things like that. But yet when I think about it, when I think back on it, all of our call stories, no matter how big or small or long or short, concerning different vocations, are truly a gift and a blessing from God. And so this week the psalmist says, Lord, you have searched me. Oh Lord, you have known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You trace my journeys and my resting places, and are acquainted with all my ways. And then the psalmist goes on to say, for you yourself created my inmost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And I'm struck by how intimate that experience is. Whether or not we hear God's audible call, God knows us inside and out. The psalmist asks God to search the inmost parts. That can be a terrifying experience, to ask God to look at even the dirty parts of us, even the parts of us that are totally disordered, and God uses even those parts. God uses even me and all of you. God has vocations for all of you, and it's not just our careers. It's not just firefighter, police officer, teacher, lawyer. It's not just that. Our vocations, our calls go further. They go to parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, child. So many things. We are so many things because God calls us to them. And through them, God strengthens us and uses us for the mission of the gospel and the kingdom of God. Amen.